subway and metro systems are best when they're designed for the people they serve first. The great urban train systems thus sort of fade into the background because they become such seamless and essential parts of getting around their respective cities. Far too often, especially in 2022, engineering or construction-based considerations are put before the passengers who will actually use a transit system. But when engineering considerations take the back seat and the experience of using transit is a top priority, amazing things can happen. And nothing better emblemizes this than the magnificent cross-platform transfer. So let's talk about what they are, where they exist, and what makes them so special. Hey, if you're new here, my name's Reece and I create videos about public transportation and infrastructure. If you like what I'm doing, consider supporting my channel on Patreon or watching my videos on Nebula. At the very least, make sure you're subscribed and you hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. It's free and it helps a lot. At its simplest, a cross-platform transfer is a type of station design, where instead of an island platform serving a single transit line with its vehicles traveling in either direction, the station instead features two islands, where each line is split across these two islands. With this type of design, you might have to go up and over to make a U-turn on the line you're already on, but that doesn't happen all that often unless you fall asleep on the train. But what it does mean is that you can simply walk across the platform to transfer to services on another line. No long hallways, escalators, stairs, or elevators needed. You can see this at Principe Pio in Madrid, where lines 6 and 10 come together with cross-platform transfers. That way, if you want to change between services, you only need to walk a few paces in most situations. Now, if you never saw my Madrid Metro explainer, which if you're watching this video you may well not have, you should definitely go check that out in the top right corner. It's a really good video and a lot of people never saw it. You might be thinking I've made a video about cross-platform transfers before, and you're not wrong. But I think the way I've looked at them, and transit and engineering in general, has changed a lot. It's easy to look at big infrastructure and think, that's impressive because we were able to plan and then build and execute that. But I think, like with so many different great engineering feats, the people at the center of the decision to actually do something are frankly more substantial than the actual feat of engineering itself. It's impressive that we took the initiative to design and plan not around what was easy or convenient to build, but around what would create the best passenger experience for people using a transit system. And cross-platform transfers are better. Convenience is huge and reduces the barriers to transit use. But another massive thing we rarely consider enough is access and accessibility. Many people, for all manner of reasons, cannot take stairs. And while escalators and elevators are better, they still aren't as good as just being able to walk a few steps. You know, across the platform? Indeed, cross-platform transfers are interesting because they have the trains, you know, the vehicles, do the moving and switching around, while the people, the passengers, the customers of the system get the easier, more comfortable experience. Instead of people having to solve the I need to get from A to B problem within the station, the trains and the engineers designing the track layouts and the stations solve the problem for people. And this isn't just about convenience and accessibility, it's also about capacity. Within a station, especially a major interchange, stairs, escalators, and elevators often become major choke points. But if transfers can occur along the entire length of a platform, it makes it much easier for massive volumes of people to switch from one line to another. That's because unlike with traditional interchange designs where there are usually a few discrete points where you can change platforms, with a cross-platform transfer, people can utilize every door and transfer for almost the entire length of the platform. Léonard in Montreal is a great example of the sort of lost art of cross-platform transfers. You can see on maps that it probably would have been easier for the green line to turn south on Atwater and cross the orange line at a perpendicular 90-degree angle. But instead, the line's diverted to provide a much better passenger experience, but also better capacity and accessibility to boot. Of course, this is all a lot harder with the modern trend towards deep underground metro systems in so many cities. I'd actually argue that in some senses, cross-platform transfers used to be more of a common feature. That's because in some of the oldest and most substantial metro systems out there, like in New York and London, you had different mixed services from local and express and different branches which came together on quad-track sections that enabled easy cross-platform transfers, because you usually would have 2 tracks going in one direction, 1 local and 1 express, and 2 tracks going in the other direction, 1 local and 1 express. And often those would also be serving different branches. So cross-platform transfers were sort of just a free feature you got with this type of quad-track metro. This was all a lot easier because at the time it was a lot more common to build metros on elevated viaducts, at least in North America, or even just on ground level, like you see on so much of the London Underground. Of course, you'd still need flyovers for the railway, but they would be more like standard railway flyovers, and there wouldn't be giant, complicated underground junctions. That type of design is a lot more common with modern cross-platform transfers in places like Singapore and Montreal, as I just mentioned. And that's often because they're really convenient ways to combine a nice grade-separated connection between the different lines for moving service or potentially even diverting it if necessary. We rarely seem to build cross-platform transfers these days, because changing the alignment of a line to better serve passengers would be seen as outlandish and excessive, which is really unfortunate. Excellent public transport is a choice, but it's not always an easy one. This is all interesting because clearly some transit building and engineering cultures are more familiar with the benefits of cross-platform transfers. Perhaps it's not the biggest deal in the world, but given that there were a million articles and videos made about the Elizabeth line, I find it amazing that the excellent cross-platform transfer at Stratford between the Central line and the brand new super high-capacity Elizabeth line barely even comes up with people. That's despite the fact that Stratford is a really impressive station, and during periods of COVID, it was the busiest station in the entire UK. Now, this isn't to suggest that only old systems have cross-platform transfers. Some of the most iconic and impressive cross-platform transfers exist in relatively young systems, like the Singapore MRT and in Taipei. Singapore's main central cross-platform transfers are almost uniquely good in that they allow you to transfer cross-platform in 2 different directions by having 2 sequential stations in between which the tracks reorganize themselves so that at one station the cross-platform transfer allows you to switch lines going in one direction, while at the other station the cross-platform transfer allows you to go in the other direction. That was most likely inspired by Hong Kong, but still impressive. Good work, Singapore. At the same time, Central Taipei has a whole number of different cross-platform transfers that make traveling more convenient. What's interesting though is that as both of these systems have grown larger and larger, cross-platform transfers seem to get less and less priority, and that's something that's interesting to note. Maybe when a system is first being built out, there's sort of more ambition. Let's do big things. What would the perfect system look like? Cross-platform transfers, right? And then as things get more difficult and people become more familiar with the costs and disruption of major construction, these sort of features get cut. But I think that's unfortunate. In a few select places where the will to create a great passenger experience is great enough, retrofitting in cross-platform transfers is possible. People talk a lot about how the Hong Kong MTR is this amazing transit system, but it's usually for its incredible efficiency, shutting down escalators when the system is less busy to save money on electricity, or building condo towers on top of stations. But what I think makes the MTR so fantastic is the incredible number of cross-platform transfers, at least one of which was completely retrofitted in. This is something most passengers will naturally almost never notice because it's so seamless, but that's exactly what makes it so special. Of course, probably the most impressive case of retrofitting in cross-platform transfers is with London's Victoria Line, because that was constructed back in the mid-20th century, and it wasn't just 1 or 2, but several cross-platform transfers that were added with its construction. And of course, this was all done before computers and advanced engineering technologies were a big part of the process. In 2022, we are still building a lot of subway systems, from Paris to Bangkok to Delhi. And our systems are quite often more coordinated and heavily planned than systems in the past. And yet, the cross-platform transfer seems like it's on its way out, less and less popular than years before, even as increasingly tracks are above ground again, often on elevated viaducts with large elevated stations that, as Singapore shows, could have very nice cross-platform transfers. Ultimately though, the fact that the cross-platform transfer seems less and less popular is not a good thing for transit riders, and it's something we need to change.